order and come back to where we were after this bill. Please go to file number 27. That's AB 495. File number 27, AB 495, concurrence item by Assemblymember Celeste Rodriguez. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 495 by Assemblymember Celeste Rodriguez and others, and act relating to immigration.
Assemblymember Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am so proud to stand before you all today to present a critical bill for families across our state, which is on concurrence today. I speak as a mother, as a Latina, as a representative of the community that has seen the most immigration actions during this reign of terror by the Trump administration. I also stand before you as the daughter of an immigrant who watched his caretaker, his grandmother, taken by immigration officials when he was 5 years old. They left him on the neighbor's porch in Pacoima, California, and he cried himself to sleep. This is the kind of trauma our California kids are being subjected to every day as the government disappears their parents. We see the stories, kids being left in a car at a gas station after ICE takes their dad, kids being ripped from their mother's arms while they plead to not take the most important person in their world away from them. 1 million children in California have at least one undocumented parent. And we know that families are being separated, whether they are documented or not. There are families across our state that are living in fear. Many of us have hosted Know Your Rights clinics, and a question that comes up often is, what is going to happen to my kids if I'm taken? I have been hosting family preparedness clinics in my district, spaces where families can put together documents to ensure their kids are okay. It is not something anyone wants to think about, but it's a part of preparedness planning that is essential for the preservation of families. Without it, kids will get lost. We have seen it happen in the first Trump administration. AB 495 fills gaps and strengthens tools for families to be empowered to make a plan. First, it creates a new temporary joint guardianship process, allowing parents facing long-term separation to designate a joint guardian while preserving parental rights. This designation is through parent choice and authorization, includes involvement from the court and an investigation. If something happened to you, who would you want to care for your child? If something happened to your loved one, would you be the person to care for their child? My prayer is that if this happens to you or a loved one, it will be temporary. And my intention with this bill is that the tools exist to ensure parents retain their rights and have the ability to choose who cares for their child until they can be reunited. The other feature of this bill is about protecting those who care for our children. Child care providers and preschools have a tremendous responsibility to protect, educate, and care for our children. Right now, there is K-12 guidance about how to respond to ICE actions. AB 495 requests that the Attorney General create guidelines for child care providers and preschools, something that does not yet exist in California, but is absolutely critical. Included in the guidance will be information about family safety plans and existing tools available to families, especially for those that are unable to plan in advance. Included in these existing tools is something called a child care authorization affidavit. My bill does not change this affidavit. It is a legal tool that has been in use for 30 years. It does add clarifying information about existing law and one addition, which is the recognition of a consular card as an ID. I share this minor component of this bill that does so many great things because it is something that the bill's opponents have focused on, manipulated, and spread misinformation about. In fact, the many calls we on this floor have received were from people out of state who never read the bill and had no idea what it did. Instead, they called, harassed my staff, continuously made racist statements, and threatened my life and the lives of my children. No one who claims to want to protect children should be against this bill. And no one who claims to want to protect children should threaten other children. I respectfully request that anyone who speaks against this bill only do so after actually reading the bill. and not be irresponsible with your words or spread misinformation. I also ask each of my colleagues to create a family plan and encourage your loved ones to do the same. By voting for this bill today, you are strengthening tools for families to stay together, and at the appropriate time, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rodriguez. Assemblymember Michelle Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise in support of this bill. The author should be commended for her work on this bill and the collaboration to address the opposition's concerns. Mr. Speaker, may we all come together and pass this bill for our immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rodriguez. Assemblymember Ortega, you are recognized.
I rise in support of AB 495. Members, imagine showing up to immigration court, going through security, showing up for your appointment, doing everything you're supposed to be doing to gain your legal status, bringing your kids with you to those appointments, and then being arrested on the spot and your kids being taken from you. Your babies being ripped out of your arms. And you having no idea what will happen to your children. Unfortunately, that is what's happening across this country today. And every child deserves stability and care from people that they know and love. It is unfortunate that we're having to make these arrangements, but this is where we are as a country, under this reign of terror. AB 495 does not alter parental rights, and parents can revoke the arrangement at any time. California needs to stand with families and not contribute to the fear that we're already living through. Instead of manufacturing false or fear-based theories, I urge you to support AB 495 by giving families a responsible, legally recognized way to protect their children during a crisis. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Ortega. Assemblymember Ahrens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of AB 495, and I want to thank my colleague from San Fernando for bringing up this really important bill and discussion. There has been a lot of misinformation about what this bill does. There's been a lot of inaccurate information, and in this particular time and moment in history, as we are just in our last couple of days, I felt compelled to just rise up, not only to support my colleague from San Fernando, but to set the record straight. This is not taking away children from parents. This is not the attacks against my colleague on this floor is reprehensible. I would speak up and say it if it were happening from any one of you. But no member, regardless of any bills that we author or introduce, whether it be the member from San Diego or the member from Silicon Valley or San Fernando, should ever be threatened with violence, and their children threatened with violence. And that is that is the direct result of the misinformation that's been swirling about what this bill does and does not do. This protects families. This is in the context of a political environment where we have those in our federal government who are trying to legalize the hunting of Latinos in California. And we have to stand up and say that this is wrong. The misinformation campaign is inappropriate and it's wrong. And I urge my colleagues, as my colleague and the author from San Fernando said, actually read the bill if you're going to be commenting on it. Do not spread information, because it's not just wrong, it is leading to political violence that we are all purportedly against. I rise in support of AB 495. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Ahrens. Assemblymember El-Hawari, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 495, authored by my colleague from the San Fernando Valley. Every parent's worst fear is being separated from their child, whether because of illness, incarceration, military deployment, or immigration detention. AB 495 gives families peace of mind by making sure that when parents face a crisis, their children are cared for by trusted loved ones, not strangers or the system. I know this experience all too well. When a young woman in high school and her mother was incredibly concerned about potentially facing deportation, she asked me and my family to take care of her daughter. And making sure that we had the opportunity to have legislation that protects that process is so utterly important. This bill does not change existing law around how caregiver affidavits work. It simply makes the process clearer and more accessible so families aren't left scrambling in moments of emergency. Caregivers must still provide identifying information and sign under penalty of perjury just as they do today, ensuring accountability remains in place. Importantly, this bill only applies when a child is already living with the caregiver, someone who has clear, established family or mentoring relationship with that child. These are trusted relatives and community members, not random individuals stepping in. Without AB 495, children can lose their home, their school, and their stability, not because their parents don't love or care for them, but simply because the right piece of paper wasn't in place. This bill fixes that. AB 495 isn't about politics, it's about protecting kids, respecting parents' rights, and keeping families together when they need it most. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember El-Hawari. Assemblymember DeMaio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to AB 495, a bill that endangers the welfare of children. I was one of the 7 no votes on this bill the first time it came to the Assembly floor, because I read it. With all due respect to the author, I read your bill, and I was astonished by the very broad definition that you put in the bill for an individual to seize custody of a child and make healthcare decisions for that child, mental health decisions for that child, education, enrollment in school decisions for that child. Yes, indeed, in the original bill, and this is why the bill was criticized, the bill allowed a non-relative extended family member, which is defined as an individual who could, quote, claim a mentoring relationship with a young minor, just by claim. And then you prohibited school officials from verifying whether any of that was correct. This is why the bill was correctly and resoundingly criticized. That is not the fault of your critics, with all due respect to the author. That is the fault of the author providing a very bad bill.
Just a moment, Mr. DeMaio.
Ms.
El-Hawari, just a moment, Mr. DeMaio. Ms. El-Hawari, state your point of order.
Point of order, I impugn the motivations of the, you cannot impugn the motivations of the author. That's what I think was happening.
As I was saying,
Excuse me, Mr. DeMaio, I haven't ruled yet. Yeah, the point is not well taken. The speaker is not impugning the motives of the author. He's impugning the language of the bill. Mr. DeMaio, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are you stating a point of order?
I actually, a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of inquiry.
Is it allowed to misrepresent a bill when we're debating that on this floor and lie about its components?
Just a moment, Ms. Rodriguez. Members, I encourage, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, to respond to your inquiry. Members are encouraged to respond in the course of debate. And in debate, please raise your microphone, refute anything that you do not believe to be the veracity of information spoken by other speakers. That's the answer. So please respond to this speaker's comments in your closing points. If there are any other speakers that wish to speak on this issue, please do so. Please raise your microphone. Mr. DeMaio, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the bill deserved criticism. And while you removed certain language, the bill still is a danger to the welfare of our children because it still allows a very loose system for individuals to come and claim custody of minor children. Some of my colleagues decried, quote, misinformation. They said, quote, people are manufacturing false or fear-based theories. Isn't that the whole basis of the bill? The majority party supporting the bill says ICE snatching people in the middle of the night and kids are being left without any parents or guardians. Can you show me that this is actually happening? And the answer is no. You have also said in this debate that there is political violence because of claims being made, but you literally in this debate also said that the federal government was terrorizing communities and, quote, hunting of Latinos in California. You besmirch law enforcement at the federal level with this outrageous claim. That puts law enforcement at risk. It puts our children at risk. It divides our communities. This bill is grounded in hysteria. But what is worse is it changes state law as it relates to individuals that can claim custody over minor children. That is a big deal. And it is so callously and recklessly, negligently being constructed. I asked the author, because you have made some amendments to this bill that have addressed some of the concerns. If you truly care about these kids, withdraw your bill, make it a 2-year bill, and work on better language. Perhaps there are some improvements to be made, but this is so reckless. It still allows an individual to claim custody of a child, and all they have to provide is, number 1, the name of the minor, number 2, the minor's birth date, number 3, their own name, and number 4, an address that they can claim. Yesterday, you imposed a bill requiring law enforcement to show identification. You're holding law enforcement, sworn personnel of the government, to a higher standard than you are strangers
30 seconds.
to take custody of minor children. Those are the legislative bills that you have just voted in the last 24 hours. And the contrast between this bill and what you were saying yesterday. That's why I brought it up in yesterday's debate and asked that you remember it when we got to AB 495. Again, I am really searching to give license to the author that she does care about these children. I'm going to assume you do. If you do, we need to park this bill and do better for these children.
Thank you, Mr.
Than
DeMaio.
the current language that's here. I ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. DeMaio. Assemblymember Schultz, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I rise today not just as a member of this body, not just as a practicing attorney, but first and foremost as a father. And the thought of being separated from my children is a pain that is beyond description. It is unimaginable, and it is something that I would not wish upon any member of this body or any member of our community, and that is sadly happening across Los Angeles and across the state of California. We are living, unfortunately, in a world where parents have to prepare for the terrible potentiality that they will be separated from their children, and they have to fathom who will care for their children if they are taken by force from their place of employment, from their home, without any time to prepare. Before I go on, I want to say as a point of personal note, I applaud the author. I thank the author and her staff for her bravery and her courage to carry forward what I think is an incredibly important bill in the face of toxic misinformation, both on this floor today and outside this chamber. Let's talk specifically about what AB 495 actually does. Let's have this conversation based on facts and not intentional misrepresentation of information. AB 495 creates a new joint guardianship in which parents designate their child's caregiver, they sign a document, and they have a court review and investigate. That's an important fact. Review and investigate before granting custody. And by the way, there are actually 26 documents that are part of this process. So let's, again, rest this debate on the facts and not appealing to parents' base motivations and fear of their kids. Let's actually talk about what the legal process looks like. I think it's important that this bill and this cause and its author be uplifted, especially in face of the blatant misinformation that we are hearing on the floor today. This bill is about parental choice, and it's about adding additional parental rights and safeguards all through the mechanism of passing 495. Now, for those of you here present and those of you watching or may watch later who perhaps don't understand the bill, let me be extraordinarily clear. The caregiver's authorization affidavit, which is baked into AB 495, was established in California law, as the author mentioned, 30 years ago. This is codified in Family Code Section 6552. And an important historical note for my colleagues, it was actually authored by a Republican, Senator Newton Russell, a Republican from my area who represented the communities of Arcadia, Monrovia, Glendale, La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and part of Pasadena for 32 years. Senator Russell understood that it was important to have a safeguard and a legal mechanism to provide for our children. Then, as now, we as a legislature see the need to support our children by ensuring that they can attend school and receive appropriate medical care and that they are not lost in the system. And I do want to, before I go on, mention that I've heard some quotes today from the member from San Diego. When you describe this bill as permitting the, quote, seizing custody of a child, that is blatant misinformation. That is not what AB 495 does. Shame on you for suggesting that that is what AB 495 does. And to describe a process of 26 documents and court review before granting custody as a, quote, loose system, again, let's have a conversation based on facts and not misrepresentation, sir. The current crisis is driven by a different need from when this provision of the Family Code first came into being. But the underlying concern for the well-being of our children drives the policy. That is the author's motivation. And it supports the goal of ensuring that when families are separated, heaven forbid that should come to pass, but if they are, there is a caregiver who can step in and enroll the child in school and ensure that they receive the medical treatment that they need. Quite simply, colleagues, I'll close with this. If you mean what you say and you actually care about our children, there is only one way to vote on this bill. To do anything less is to engage in performative politics at its worst. I will be voting aye.
Thank you, Assemblymember Schultz. Assemblymember Lee, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, much disinformation has been said on this floor and outside these chambers, and I want to commend the author from San Fernando Valley for her strong resilience and her strength in spite of all of that. We are here debating this bill and hopefully today passing this bill because this administration endangers children and their parents. I don't know what news my colleague across the aisle reads, but even Donald Trump himself brags about mass deportations. And you know what doesn't make children safer? When their parents are seized and sent to Alligator Alcatraz or Uganda or to El Salvador in the middle of the night, that makes them less safe. And I'm glad that you are worried about the seizure and abuse of children because that was the kind of behavior that Donald Trump's best friend, Jeffrey Epstein, was infamous for doing. And now, the party in DC, the majority party, is covering up that kind of same abuse. So this kind of deflection is clearly to cover their mass raids of terror. The Supreme Court this week allows the explicit discrimination against people who are not white. And that is why today, even as your Human Services Chair, I hear tearfully from caregivers who have to cry and tell me about how they hear from parents that if the worst happens to me, if I'm going to work, if I'm at a car wash, and I'm gone one day, I want you to look after my daughter. I want you to look after my son. This is the situation we're in, and it is because of the dangerous rhetoric that's become militant policy from the federal government that we need to pass this bill. So members, I heartily ask you to vote for AB 495. It's a strong priority of many of our caucuses, including the Legislative Progressive Caucus. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Lee. Madam Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today as chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus and a member of the Latino Caucus to support AB 495, one of our priority bills this year. This bill is about families. Immigration raids are breaking up families and harming communities across the state. This affects our children and those who care for them, like our child care providers and our teachers. Without guidance and model policies, there's just too much uncertainty at these facilities. This bill sets up a new temporary joint guardianship process in probate court. So when a parent has to be away for a long stretch of time, like our military service, an immigration-related administrative action, incarceration, or for health reasons, they can choose someone they trust to help care for their child without giving up the parental rights. It's a common sense way to keep kids safe and reduce the trauma that they face during these times of transition. This bill makes sure caregivers and institutions have a clear legal direction that they need. And most importantly, it gives families more tools to plan for emergency situations. The latest amendments make it clear that parents retain their rights and the agreement requires parental authorization. Members, I ask you to vote aye on AB 495.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Assemblymember Mark Gonzalez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today on behalf of the Latino Caucus and a proud co-author in strong support of AB 495. And I want to thank my colleague from the city of San Fernando, who's also a mom, for the Family Preparedness Plan Act. Let's be clear, no children in California should ever be left crying at the school gates, wondering why their parents never came back to pick them up. We have seen this administration again and again tear families apart and make moms and dads disappear forever. And if you don't believe that, you are delusional. They come back, there's no notice, no follow-up, no explanation. They are gone forever and vanished. And if you can't believe that, you are delusional. AB 495 is how we fight back. This bill says child care centers are for learning, not for ICE. It says schools are for building friendships and bridging gaps, not hunting grounds to target our communities. AB 495 arms families with the tools to plan, to protect, and to preserve their rights. It ensures every child has someone waiting for them, someone they know and trust, even in the darkness of circumstances. Colleagues, let's remind ourselves this is California. I cannot believe we are having to have this debate today. We do not abandon children. We do not let fear tear families apart. The grand old party claims that they try and protect children, yet don't want them to have a support system after this corrupt federal administration steals and kidnaps their parents away. If protecting children from government cruelty is controversial, then shame on anyone who stands up in opposition to protecting children. If you don't have children, maybe you can stomach working for ICE. But in California, we protect families. We don't partner with cruelty. Because in California, we don't let children become collateral damage to a broken immigration system. Do the right thing. I urge an aye vote on AB 495.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gonzalez. Assemblymember Calderon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as a proud co-author in strong support of AB 495, the Family Preparedness Plan Act. With the wave of deportations and immigration raids that we are experiencing in California and my cities that I represent, families in our communities need a tool to prepare for the unthinkable scenario where a parent is unable to pick up their child from school, from daycare, or from the babysitter because they have been detained. Unfortunately, I've seen this scenario play out too many times in recent months in my cities, and this is something I never imagined I would see. AB 495 will help provide parents peace of mind during these uncertain times, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Calderon. Assemblymember Bonta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I want to first thank our colleague from San Fernando for bringing forward this incredibly important piece of legislation. As a mother, as a legislator that represents a community where over 1/3 of our community members are immigrants or residents born abroad, this bill is so sadly essential. We are living in a time where we know that because of the federal government's disappearance of our community members, we have to act and make sure that we are protecting our children. Now, our colleagues from the other side might choose to continue to engage in willful ignorance to try to dissuade us from the fact that these terrorist acts are actually happening, but they are. And so who are we to do anything else but say, in those moments when families are experiencing the darkest possible thought, being separated from their children, who are we to do anything else but try to stand up and say, the least we can do is give you a pathway to a plan. And you know what that plan might require? It might require an individual to be able to say, because my family is not here, I have to appoint somebody who isn't my blood, but who will take care of my blood. It will require somebody to say, please, please, make sure to take care of the medical concerns that my child has, or ensure that they have the ability to access their finances, or ensure that they have the ability to go to school. And while they are experiencing the darkest moment of their lives because their parents have been disappeared, please, please do the simple thing of making sure they have the resources to be taken care of. I, at some point, cannot take the willful ignorance, the complete disregard for life, for the basic reality that families are being torn apart, and the absolute insult of trying to expect us to deny that, to call it a sham, to call it unreal. To my colleague from San Diego, have you no shame? I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bonta. Leader Gallagher, you are recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. First of all, I don't doubt the motivation behind this bill. I know that the author comes from a good place in trying to protect families and children. I know that's why she brought this bill forward. My problem is in the policy. And in the current, even under the current language of the bill, parents aren't involved in the process. Parents don't have to sign the caregiver affidavit, and I have a problem with that. And I mean, I'm reading the current analysis of the bill, and the Senate amendment still says that parents, there's no requirement that parents sign the caregiver affidavit. I think that's problematic. And especially if we're saying that this is for planning purposes or preparedness purposes. If that's true, then why wouldn't we have parents say, look, I'm going to plan for this and I'm going to designate someone, and the parents are the ones who make that decision. Rather than have an affidavit that now under the current language of the bill, at least we've taken out that a non-family member can sign this. That I'm appreciative of that. That was addressing, I think, a major flaw in the legislation, because when this first started out, anyone could sign that affidavit and say, yes, I'm the caregiver for a child, and then have that status and that power over the child's care and school and medical decisions. That was extremely problematic, and I think that criticism was very warranted, that was a problem. Now, the language of the bill doesn't allow a non-family member, but it does expand the definition of relative to the 5th degree of kinship. We're talking about third cousins, that could potentially be the caregiver. Again, why not have in here a requirement that the parent has to be the one to decide, hey, I'm designating this person to care for my child, and especially if it's about planning and preparedness, which is what I'm being told is the whole plan here. I also think we really do need to be careful of our language. And I certainly feel like I personally, especially lately, have been really trying to do that and to be sympathetic to what may be going on in other people's lives. And my colleague from Coachella brought this up the other day, that when you use words like terrorism, these are ICE agents who are doing their jobs. They're not terrorists. They're enforcing federal law. So when we say terrorism, is that intended to incite and evoke the kind of emotions that I don't think are really helpful right now in our society? Let's just be accurate about what's going on. And I don't know how many times this is happening. It would be good to hear maybe some stats on that, of how many times that we're having situations where an adult is being deported, and their children are left here to essentially fend for themselves. I'm very sympathetic to that situation, absolutely. But I've also have an understanding that when this is happening, the entire family is sent back home in a deportation proceeding, and the families are tried to be kept together. I could be wrong about that, but that's been my understanding. And so before we pass a policy, again, that I think still has some flaws in it, that doesn't really include parents, and there's no requirement that the parent has to sign off on this, that's problematic. But I'd also at least like to hear the data and how often is this actually happening?
30 seconds.
I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not. And I trust when people say on this floor in their communities they've seen it happen, I trust that. But before we pass a policy like this, it would be good to at least hear some data on how often this is happening, and why not have a requirement that parents have to sign off on this affidavit. I think that would be a good policy.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gallagher. Assemblymember Bryan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. First, I just want to thank my colleague from San Fernando for her courage and willingness to fight this righteous fight. I also want to point out something that is very obvious to me. Not a soul on this floor spoke against this bill during House of Origin until the misinformation campaign started revving up. There were no problems articulated on this House floor until just now. It was also compared to a bill we voted on the other day relative to the requirements for ICE agents, suggesting they were unequal, as if 27 pieces of documentation and a sworn affidavit which carries the weight of speaking under oath is equivalent to taking the freaking mask off your face. That is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, taking a mask off your face is not the only requirement for ICE agents. They're also required to get a warrant, but we've just forgotten that recently because that doesn't happen. I don't know how many of you ever went home to somebody who wasn't a biological relative. I didn't meet a biological relative till I was late into my teens. Or ever had a situation where you knew somebody who didn't know where they could go after school because their parent wasn't there anymore for incarceration or other reasons. That person, by the way, who always showed up was my mother, is my mother. That's why Susan Bryan had almost 200 children who were not her kin in our house, having meals, having a place to stay. Many who eventually became her foster children, and 9 of us who she adopted into the Bryan family. Parents need that additional community support when tragic things are happening during the worst moments in their life. And I can't think of anything more tragic or anything worse than going to your job at Home Depot or at the car wash or anywhere else where you are participating in the greatness of our economy and being yanked from that job without warning, without expectation, being held in a detention center and sent who knows where. Your family certainly doesn't, and your child in 3rd grade certainly doesn't, and wondering what will happen to your child. We have to make those contingency plans. That is why this has been in place for over 30 years. It's not just ICE that is causing these disruptions in family stability. Many things. When you are struggling, when you are hurting, there are many things that can break up our families. And we should do the best we can to both make sure we keep families whole and make sure that if that disruption takes place, that the community, that the kin, the chosen kin, can step in and be there. Otherwise, the outcomes are disastrous for everybody. This is a family-centered bill. This is a bill that is centered in children. And I will strongly be supporting it today.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bryan. Assemblymember Tangipa, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, what we've heard here today is that we're fear-mongering, we're lying, we're misleading people. But the amendments that were accepted proves that there was an issue with the bill prior to. It proves that the calls that were made to the office, this bill needed to change, or else you wouldn't have changed it. It's not up to us to do that. That the parents that were asking simply that somebody else could take control, and if you truly believed what you had to say, you wouldn't have changed the bill just a couple weeks ago. You wouldn't have changed the bill then. And that if we're talking about the Trump administration and how this bill is so needed right now for the Family Preparedness Act, under the Trump administration there have been 1.5 million deportations that have happened, including Title 42. Under the Biden administration, it was 2.8 million people. Under the Obama administration, it was 3 million people. So if it wasn't needed then, why is it being used now? Ask yourself that. If you want the data and you want the numbers, that's the fact. Didn't need it then? You didn't even need it 8 months ago under a different administration. But now you need it. Now you need to say that we're fear-mongering. Now you need to say that we hate immigrant families. You had a full time to do it. You've had a decade to do it. You had under the Clinton administration to do it, and it was never needed then, but it's needed now. And it's our fault because we hate immigrants? I don't think so. I don't hate immigrants. I want to take care of our families, but when you break the law, it is about accountability. And still, under U.S. Code Section 1325, it is illegal for somebody to enter the country and to remain here. When a criminal breaks the law, it's not considered family separation when they remove that
Mr. Tangipa, we need to speak to the merits of this legislation and not immigration policy as a whole.
This bill talks about immigration policy under the Family Preparedness Act. And let's think about it. It expands this parent or somebody who could take control under the 5th kinship. Your great, 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 grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1926. My great-grandmother was born in the 1800s. My great-great-great-grandmother was probably more than likely born in the 1700s. And this expands it to where you don't need a signature as long as you can prove that? My mother was one of 16. I have 60-plus cousins out there. Most of them I've never met. And yet they can take control of an individual without a signed court affidavit, without parental signature? And we're the ones fear-mongering. Shameful, if that's what we want to say. The numbers are there. Ask yourself, why didn't you need it 8 months ago? Ask yourself, why didn't you need it 2 years ago? Ask yourself, why didn't you need it 10 years ago? But yet we're the ones playing the games. I ask you to vote no on this.
Thank you, Assemblymember Tangipa. Assemblymember Sharp Collins, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to admit, y'all can mark this off all on your bingo card. I did not plan on getting up to speak. Okay? But it was laid on my heart to get up after hearing this debate that's happening here on the floor. So I jotted down a couple of things to make sure I got everything right. So I rise in support of AB 495. When you're sick, don't you prepare for the end by getting your burial together? By creating a will, putting your home in a trust, securing your life insurance, and so many other things. What is the difference between that and preparing to ensure that someone is there to take care of your children? Do you want children or anyone else to go into a system that we are still working to ensure was funded adequately and that has a large number of children that are still seeking a home and a family to call their own? Keeping a child with a relative and with true family support services is a much better option than anything else. I'm dressed in African attire today. In traditional African culture, we view child rearing as a community, as an extended family responsibility, meaning it is all of our responsibility to be able to move forward where the child belongs to the entire community, not just a biological parent. That's something that's called kinship when it comes down to traditional African culture. So we all should know that ensuring that proper care is critical for the emotional well-being of any family member, especially a minor child. Without a proper plan, the family's future cannot be left, or can be left uncertain and vulnerable during a time that is already difficult. And we know that this is something that we need to make sure we're doing as we're talking about funding mental health and so many other things. So I would like to thank my colleague from San Fernando for bringing forth this bill. I am a proud mother of 2 children. I have been a foster parent. I've been raised in a home with a bunch of foster children as well. I've been a mentor to so many other people from youth programs and so forth. And I know and I have heard about the impact that is coming down. So when you talk about family, relative, extended families in traditional African culture, it's all of our collective responsibility. Think about the principles of Kwanzaa. If you don't know, look it up. The Nguzo Saba, look it up. The fact of the matter is, thank you for bringing it forward. I have to make sure, and I want everybody to make sure, that your children are protected, grandchildren, auntie, cousin, friend, best friend, I don't care. Everybody is going to be secure. I respectfully ask for an aye vote on this bill. You've done a hell of a job. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Assemblymember Sharp Collins. Assemblymember Jackson, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The only thing I want to talk about is the child. And when we think about our children, no matter what circumstances they find themselves in, there is one thing that is the most important thing, and that is stability. Consistency and stability. So if we are going to set up our children up for success, when unexpected things happen, we have to make sure that we are going to provide the most stable environment as possible for these children. So that means that we have to prepare for multiple situations. And those multiple situations could include that there may not actually be a relative that is safe to place a child with. Not all of our population have traditional households. I myself, when I was in the child development space, had to approve people to take them into their home and work with law enforcement to place them somewhere else because a traditional family was not available. Now, the biggest problem that impedes the proper support and the proper development of a child is adult issues. So it's important that when we're talking about children, that we actually do tone it down a bit so that we're actually looking out for what is in the best interest of the child. And so there is no doubt that the member for San Fernando sees a need that there could be some instability in a child's life. So the question is, regardless of the situation, how can we make sure that that child stays as stable as possible and limit as many traumatic situations as possible? Because once trauma occurs in a child's life, it stays with them for the rest of their life. And if too many traumatic situations happen in a child's life, then it sends them onto a road where there absolutely is more likely that they're not successful than they are. So when we think about this bill, yes, in some situations it could be messy. But that's what human existence is all about. Being human just means messy sometimes. And so I rise in support of this bill because we have got to make sure that we center the child. And I hope that when we continue to talk about this bill, we talk more about the child and not other things. Because then we're going to be missing the point. These are the future of California, and we've got to set up the future of California for success. So with that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote on AB 495.
Thank you, Assemblymember Jackson. Assemblymember Patterson, you are recognized.
Great, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'll start off with something positive about AB 495, and that is, it is true, it is demonstrably better than the prior version. And I do think the intent of my colleague from San Fernando and a lot of the people who have spoken in support of the bill are good. I mean, I don't really doubt the intent there, but also, you know, in between all the good thoughts and reasons for supporting this bill, there were a lot of comments made shaming people on this side of the aisle for having different opinions. I don't know if it was me in particular, or perhaps my colleague from San Diego, or maybe somebody else, maybe an influential pastor in this state. I'm not really sure. But if you read the bill, like my good friend from Burbank suggested that we do, the language in AB 495 prior to the amendment was extremely broad, and it applied to just about everybody. Now, the language has been amended substantially, but there are multiple sections of the bill. In terms of a person receiving custody of an individual, there is a long list of documentation, as my colleague from Burbank has pointed out. But the caregiver authorization is not that. And it actually says it straight up in the bill. And hey, good news for us. And I recommend you take my colleague from Burbank up on his offer to read the bill, because the caregiver affidavit is actually in the text of the bill. And that's good because I'm a picture book kind of guy. And very specifically, it says this: warning to local educational agencies and healthcare service, permission to read.
Without objection.
Thank you. Warning to local educational agencies and healthcare service providers. A seal or signature from a court is not required. This form is not required to be notarized. Warning to caregiver. Do not sign this form if any of the statements above are incorrect, or you will be committing a crime punishable by a fine. So if somebody's coming in to get the kid and they really shouldn't get the kid, they're probably not worried about that section. But all it requires is box number 6 that says, I'm unable to contact the parents or other person having legal custody of the minor at this time to notify them of my intended authorization. It very specifically says they don't even have to tell the parents. So it's not crazy to think that some of us over here might have a little bit of concern about that. And so I think I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But the mischaracterization, not by us, the mischaracterization by the other side of our concerns of this bill. It's actually in the text of the bill. And anybody who doesn't believe me, please pull it up, because it's actually right there. The authorization is right there. The courts are not required to be involved in this documentation. So I would like to go back at what my colleague from Nicholas said. Is that where you're still from, Nicholas? East Nicholas. There's no West Nicholas, by the way. If the intent really is to plan, let's get behind that. I could do that. I could support that. But I am actually thankful to the activists out there that did raise hell on this. And if there was not enough speaking about this the first time, I'm sorry, there's 2,000 bills a year here that I got to think about. So I'm actually thankful for those people that raised concern on this bill to educate me about the problems of the bill. So I would take the opportunity to go back and read this bill. But please don't dismiss our concerns as just shameful, as trying to stroke hate in our community or something like that.
30 seconds.
Because there are legitimate concerns, but I will give you this. The bill, I'll say this, I'll just end on a good note, is demonstrably better than it was initially. But it's still very, very broad. And if this is about planning, we would like to work with you on that, because we actually agree. Give the parents the opportunity, if there's a crisis with their child, to find somebody to care with them at that time. With that, I ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Patterson. Assemblymember Kalra, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank our colleague from San Fernando for her great courage in having to lead forward this bill. As my seatmate indicated, this is not a bill that we would hope that we would have to do. But once again, the circumstances bring us to this place. And, you know, to be honest, it's hard to be cautious and tiptoe around language when the actions that we're seeing in our very own communities represent such brutality and cruelty towards our families in our community. And I guess it must be nice to live in some kind of privileged bubble where you're completely oblivious to that suffering happening in your community, or even worse, intentionally apathetic to that cruelty and lacking of any amount of empathy for these babies, for these children. And to be able to even refer to this legislation as callous and reckless without turning your attention to the federal government and its callousness and recklessness that causes us to be here today to have this piece of legislation is such a deflection from the realities that our families are facing. To be able to do all that pearl clutching over how we're describing the terror that families are facing, while there are mothers and fathers that can't even clutch their own children right now because they've been ripped away. As to the idea of making it a 2-year bill, well, if you all have an issue with this policy, I suggest you contact your president, because he's not waiting 2 years. He's not going to stop what we've been seeing in our communities. It is our friends across the aisle, their party is in power, that's causing this. They're the ones that are ramping up the temperature. They're the ones that have a director of Homeland Security who just the other day, watching a commercial, talked about hunting people down. Now, why didn't we do this 8 months ago? I'll do you one better. Why didn't we do this 8 years ago when Trump was in office? And I'll tell you why. Because as bad as the immigration policies were then, and by the way, back then I wrote a resolution to abolish ICE that referred to both Democratic and Republican administrations, because I have a problem with both administrations and how they've used ICE in immigration enforcement. So why didn't we do anything 8 months ago? Why didn't we do anything 8 years ago? Because it's quite clear that the policy of the current administration has ramped up their efforts in a way that we have never seen. They have masked jackboot thugs going into courthouses, going into hospitals, going to schools, ripping people away from their place of work at a car wash in front of a Home Depot. He is spreading this fear and sending these masked men into every corner of our community. And so that is why we have to have some policies in place that allow for parents that are ripped away to know that their child is going to be looked after while they're being taken who knows where, for who knows what purpose, for who knows how long, who knows what country they're taken to. These are all policies by this current administration that causes us to have to put in place a policy that at the very least gives an opportunity for those children to have someone that cares about them, someone they know.
30 seconds.
Take care of them while they're living in utter fear, not knowing where their parents are. That is why we are here today. That is the policy you should be outraged about. That is what all of us on this floor should be outraged about, and contacting the administration and saying enough is enough. Leave our families alone. Leave our children alone.
Thank you, Assemblymember Kalra. Assemblymember Soria, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise in strong support of AB 495. Our immigrant families are facing an unprecedented level of threats from this federal administration's mass immigration raids. Unlike past presidents from both parties, sensitive locations, like our children's schools, are no longer safe from aggressive immigration enforcement. That is what is happening. This leaves our school teachers and administrators unsure on how to respond when masked men claiming to be law enforcement show up on their campuses. I have personally heard from many of my school district superintendents, and I will say even from some of the most conservative parts of my district in Madera County, for those colleagues of mine on this floor that also represent Madera County, who actually support the bill and the guidance it will provide them on how to respond to these situations, and most importantly, on how to protect their students and their families. AB 495 also gives parents peace of mind by allowing them to create a new joint guardianship through the courts. That means if the worst happens, our families know that someone they trust will have the legal tools they need to step in and care for their children. This bill is about safety, about stability, and about the dignity for families who are living in constant fear. And I will say, colleagues, I'm not relying on my social media to figure out that this fear is real. I'm actually hearing directly from my own relatives and my own constituents when I'm in the district. I hear the stories every single day. My vote today is to protect kids like Kylie, Rio, Rayo in the Central Valley. My vote today is to give Maria, Monica, Brenda, moms in my district a peace of mind. I want to thank the author from the San Fernando Valley for her courage, for bringing this important measure forward and facing the misinformation head on, because this is the right thing to do today, not tomorrow. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Soria. Assemblymember Ransom, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I rise, I did not intend to rise to speak at all, but I rise in strong support of my colleague from San Fernando. Myself have had the opportunity to serve as a caregiver unexpectedly. You all may remember a few months ago, I brought my niece into this chamber. I introduced her to folks here. In reality, I was her caregiver when her mom unexpectedly passed away. I introduced her as my niece. The reality is she's actually a cousin. She's my aunt's child. But because of the age difference, our family always referred to her as my niece. And when her mom passed away, my grandmother was not able to take care of her. And so I suddenly had a child unexpectedly. That child went to school that day. But when she got out of school, her mom was no longer with us. And we didn't know where she was going to go. I didn't have documentation for her because the family had to gather those documents and figure out how we were going to get her a sense of normalcy and a sense of belonging and a sense of feeling when she had to now come into a new home with a new family 100 miles away from where she lived to go to a new school. And so I had to fill out a caregiver's affidavit. My county's caregiver's affidavit is green. I remember filling out that affidavit and going to the school and going to the county and getting her medical benefits and all of those things. This is not a new affidavit. And sometimes the parent's not available. In this case, there was no parent available to sign the affidavit. There was no other adult available to sign the affidavit to take care of this child whose parent was no longer available. This is not just something that benefits immigrant families. This benefits any family who finds themselves in a situation where we need to first take care of our children. As we are watching our children their parents disappear, we're finding children in foster care. We're finding children abandoned. This is a responsible approach, and it doesn't matter if previous administrations didn't fix this problem. We have an opportunity right now to fix a problem that is prevalent. We've marched on kids in cages. We've marched on, we want to make sure that the kids are not in foster care. These kids are ending up in systems. Families cannot even locate them. So if we have an opportunity to sign into law something that says our child care facilities and our schools are going to educate people on how to be more prepared and make sure that we know who's going to take care of children in the event of a parent's disappearance, I don't think it's responsible for us to sit here and debate why we didn't do it under Clinton or Obama. We have the chance, we know better, to do better. And for that, I'd like to see us do better. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Ransom. Seeing and hearing no further debate, Assemblymember Rodriguez, do you wish to close?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member from Tracy for sharing her personal story. I don't wish it on anyone. Her remarks were about the affidavit, which has been the center of this debate, which is not part of this bill because it has been existing law for 30 years created by a Republican. But because you're not going to read and you're not going to listen to the folks who are speaking today, I just want you to know, especially for those who said we need a system for parents to be involved in these matters. If hope to God they get that chance, that's what this bill does. It creates a new temporary joint guardianship that ensures a parent is involved with a court, with authorization and investigation. Everything that you're saying needs to happen is in the bill. So thank you for arguing for this bill, but I wish you understood that. I want to thank my colleagues for speaking up today. I'm so grateful to each of you because you know what's actually happening across our state and you're ready to do the right thing, and that's why we're here. When AB 495 came before you on the floor this June, not only did not one soul speak against it, it had bipartisan support. Since the misinformation campaign began, I cannot help but wonder, what if all this energy to lie and manipulate people was instead used to uplift the truth and protect them? Perhaps then, if you acknowledged and pushed back on the federal administration from ripping apart our families, this bill wouldn't be needed. But you're not. And in California, we're going to keep building a line of defense against the Trump administration. The bill before you is about helping children and families. If you truly support the intent of this bill, you would support this measure. Before I close, I want to thank my colleagues, the tireless efforts of my co-sponsors, and incredible staff who have put their heart into this bill. The over 50 organizations who have actively supported this effort. And I ask on behalf of all of us and the families across California for your aye vote.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rodriguez. All debate having ceased, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 57, noes 18. The measure passes. Senate amendments are concurred in.